There comes a time in our lives where we start to think of sin as normal, when outrageous things which would have been detestable to us a few years or months even before suddenly becomes normality. And I want people to remember that justice without any form of humility can turn people violent, right? And when people try and be righteous in their own eyes, seek justice for themselves, they start to become violent. And that's what we're going to see in Judges chapter 20. We're going to unpack Israel's assembly, the war against Benjamin, the repeated losses, and how Israel tries to seek justice, and how this reveals how fractured it has become without the Lord. And I'll give you one immediate action to help you pursue truth without letting anger take over in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. So, welcome to Judges chapter 20. This is the penultimate chapter of Judges, and it's going to follow the horror of Gibeah in the previous chapter. And it shows that the whole nation is going to be assembling before the Lord at Mizpah, and then Israel hears the Levite account. They demand Benjamin hand over the evil men, and when Benjamin refuses, there's a civil war that breaks out, and Israel initially suffers terrible losses, but then returns to the Lord with fasting and sacrifice, and then finally wins by strategy and divine permission. So the chapter is about justice, but it's also a warning, right? So that people understand that if you're broken, you can try and do the right thing, but in a broken way. So it's a broken form of justice. Okay, so let's read verses 1 to 17. The focus here is going to be the assembly of Israel, the Levites report, and how they demand for justice over what happened in Judges chapter 19. And Benjamin is going to refuse to hand over the wicked men. So my question to you is, why does the whole nation gather when one city has sinned? Verse 1, Then all the Israelites came out from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, and the congregation assembled in one body before the Lord at Mizpah. The chiefs of all the people, of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers bearing arms. Now the Benjaminites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah, and the Israelites said, Tell us, how did this criminal act come about? The Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered, I came to Gibeah that belongs to Benjamin, I and my concubine, to spend the night. The lords of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house at night. They intended to kill me, and they raped my concubine until she died. Then I took my concubine and cut her into pieces and sent her throughout the whole extent of Israel's territory, for they have committed a vile outrage in Israel. So now, you Israelites, all of you, give your advice and counsel here. All the people got up as one, saying, We will not, any of us, go to our tents, nor will any of us return to our houses. But now this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. We will take 10 men from 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000, to bring provisions for the troops who will go to repay Gibeah of Benjamin for all the disgrace that they have done in Israel. So all the men of Israel gathered against the city, united as one. And the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, What crime is this that has been committed among you? Now then, hand over those scoundrels in Gibeah, so that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel. But the Benjaminites would not listen to their kinsfolk, the Israelites. The Benjaminites came together out of the towns to Gibeah, to go out to battle against the Israelites. On that day, the Benjaminites mustered 26,000 armed men from their towns beside the inhabitants of Gibeah, who mustered 700 picked men. Of all this force there were 700 picked men who were left-handed. Every one could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. And the Israelites, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 armed men, all of them warriors. So why does the whole nation gather at Mizpah? Well, the reason is because Gibeah's sin is not just a particular isolated problem. It has now become a covenant crisis. So Israel gathers as one body because they know this violence threatens the whole people. And the Levites' report is meant to awaken something. It's meant to awaken moral seriousness. And the assembly shows that hidden evil has become a national issue, right? So sin is a matter for the whole body, not only the immediate perpetrators, because it has effects that propagate beyond itself. So, again, justice, that's a shared responsibility, and sin is never satisfied with the status quo. And if you don't cut it off early, it will grow into something completely unrecognizable. Alright, now let's read verses 18 to 36. The focus here is going to be Israel seeking God, fighting, and then being defeated. Then they're going to change strategy, and the battle is going to turn. So, why does the nation lose twice, even when its cause is just? And why does the third attempt succeed, where the first two failed? Verse 18, the Israelites proceeded to go up to Bethel, where they inquired of God, which of us shall go up first to battle against the Benjaminites? And the Lord answered, Judah shall go up first. Then the Israelites got up in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. The Israelites went out to battle against Benjamin, and the Israelites drew up the battle line against them at Gibeah. The Benjaminites came out of Gibeah and struck down on that day 22,000 of the Israelites. The Israelites strengthened themselves and again formed the battle line in the same place where they had formed it on the first day. So the Israelites advanced against the Benjaminites the second day. Benjamin moved out against them from Gibeah the second day, and struck down 18,000 of the Israelites, all of them armed men. Then all the Israelites, the whole army, went back to Bethel and wept, sitting there before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening. Then they offered burnt offerings and sacrifices of well-being before the Lord, and the Israelites inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, ministered before it in those days, saying, Shall we go out once more to battle against our kinsfolk, the Benjaminites, or shall we desist? The Lord answered, Go up, for tomorrow I will give them into your hand. So Israel stationed men in ambush around Gibeah. Then the Israelites went up against the Benjaminites on the third day, and set themselves in array against Gibeah as before. When the Benjaminites went out against the army, they were drawn away from the city as before. They began to inflict casualties on the troops along the main roads, one of which goes up to Bethel and the other to Gibeah, as well as in the open country, killing about 30 men of Israel. The Benjaminites thought, They are being routed before us as previously, but the Israelites said, Let us retreat and draw them away from the city towards the roads. The main body of the Israelites drew back its battle line to Baal Tamar, while those Israelites who were in ambush rushed out of their place west of Gibeah. There came against Gibeah 10,000 picked men out of all Israel, and the battle was fierce, but the Benjaminites did not realize that disaster was close upon them. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and the Israelites struck down 25,100 men of Benjamin that day, all of them armed. Then the Benjaminites saw that they were defeated. The Israelites gave ground to Benjamin because they relied on the troops in ambush that they had stationed against Gibeah. Okay, biblical unlock here. Why does the battle finally succeed? So the first two failed. Why? And the chapter actually doesn't fully explain the reason, but it shows that they are being humbled, and they are grieving, they're angry and righteous, and yet perhaps a little too confident in their own strength. So the defeat forces them back to fasting, tears, and sacrifice. So God may humble people so that they learn dependence, even when the reason is unknown. And the second thing that we see here is, why does the battle finally succeed on the third attempt? Because the Lord gives victory at the right moment. Human effort is still involved, but the turning point is divine. So there needs to be a change in heart posture. There needs to be a change in strategy. And all that comes when we pursue righteousness with humility. So success is a gift that comes when human pride is lowered. Alright, let's read the final part of the chapter, verses 37 to 48. The focus here is going to be the ambush, the collapse of Benjamin, and the tragedy of civil war. Verse 37. The troops in ambush rushed quickly upon Gibeah. Then they put the whole city to the sword. Now the agreement between the main body of Israel and the men in the ambush was that when they sent up a cloud of smoke out of the city, the main body of Israel should turn in battle. But Benjamin had begun to inflict casualties on the Israelites, killing about 30 of them. So they thought, surely they are defeated before us, as in the first battle. But when the cloud, a column of smoke, began to rise out of the city, the Benjaminites looked behind them, and there was the whole city going up in smoke towards the sky. Then the main body of Israel turned, and the Benjaminites were dismayed, for they saw that disaster was close upon them. Therefore they turned away from the Israelites in the direction of the wilderness, but the battle overtook them, and those who came out of the city were striking them down in between. Surrounding the Benjaminites, they pursued them from Nohah, and trod them down as far as a place east of Gibeah. 18,000 Benjaminites fell, all of them courageous fighters. When they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, 5,000 of them were cut down on the main roads, and they were pursued as far as Gidom, and 2,000 of them were slain. So all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 arms-bearing men, all of them courageous fighters. But 600 turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and remained at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. Meanwhile, the Israelites turned back against the Benjaminites and put them to the sword, the city, the people, the animals, and all that remained. Also the remaining towns they set on fire. Final biblical unlock. What do we see here? What's the deepest lesson of the ending, and why does this chapter end quite tragically? I think it's sad because we're thinking about a war which was motivated because of the depravity that we saw in Judges chapter 19. But then this war can also become a civil war because the tribe of Benjamin is nearly wiped out, and the victory is actually soaked in grief. So the chapter actually refuses to let us turn justice into triumphalism. Okay, the nation has defended righteousness, but there is a sad consequence of this in that the city, the nation, is shattered. So a good cause can still be poisoned by the hardness of the heart. So the sin spreads damage far beyond the original crime, and one city's wickedness leads to a national wound. So Judges chapter 20 again, it shows that and leaves us with a need for a deeper healing than just retaliation. And that's what we're going to see in how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. So, Judges chapter 20 shows a people trying to confront evil, but doing so through a civil war that leaves deep wounds. But in Christ, the answer is not the denial of justice, but the arrival of a king who judges without tribal hatred and heals without ignoring sin. Jesus does not let evil stand, but he also refuses to let vengeance become the ruler of the heart. He is the one who can bring true righteousness without tearing the people apart. This is why we read in Romans chapter 12, verse 19, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.'" So this is a warning and a comfort for us. Justice belongs to God, and he can judge without corrupting the judge. That is the important point. If we try and take justice into our own hands, this is the result. Human fracture, human sin that propagates beyond itself and has ramifications deeper than we can possibly comprehend. Alright, so how can we apply this chapter in our everyday life? I think the most important thing would be to ask whether or not our anger over a wrong is drawing us towards humility and truth or towards self-justifying rage. Because if it's drawing us towards humility and truth, you can say that, like for example, anger in and of itself is not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's how you use that anger. It's how you actually allow that anger to manifest in your actions that becomes the real point of contention. If it's bringing you towards humility and truth, and you're doing it out of love because you're angry that you want something to change, you want the Lord to be visible in a particular place, that is a good form of anger. But if that anger is just causing you to go into a self-destructive rage and a cycle of violence, then obviously that is not. So you have to be very careful. Where is my anger drawing me to? So we learned in this episode that Israel's assembly shows that public evil requires public accountability, that a just cause does not guarantee just actions, and that defeat can humble a people into fasting, sacrifice, and dependence. And sometimes the defeats that you incur are actually good things in order to humble you and bring you back to God. And the chapter ends in grief because civil war is always going to leave scars. Next time we're going to go to the final chapter of Judges, which is Judges chapter 21. We're going to unpack the oath, the grief, the search for wise, and the book's final note of moral chaos. You don't want to miss it. That's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.